Ahoy! Today we're doing something that I haven't done in a very long time, and that is a tier list. This tier list is for casual and ranked, and not for competitive. I will, however, take some influence from certain strong picks in competitive that also work well in non-competitive settings, but we'll get to that later. First, I want to explain a little bit. There's going to be some stuff in this tier list that's going to be a bit different. You'll see, I'll explain that when it happens. And outside of that, I haven't made a tier list in a really long time, and there's been a reason for that. And that's because I think tier lists, or I thought tier lists are a bit, well, useless at times for the average player, because often you will simply do better with the best god that you play the best over some meta pick. Sure, there are exceptions if one god is really overtuned or really, really bad, but like, for example, right now, if you're playing like anywhere from bronze to plat, I would say at least, and if not higher, you could still play a C, D tier god, and you could perform well with him if you're good with him. Say, for example, Loki. And I wanted to not really, I don't know, push my ideas too much in that sense by making a tier list and saying, like, you know, this is what it looks like in casual or in ranked. But then I realized something. When I was making the item tier list just the other day, I had to look over some other tier lists because I was basically looking for another item tier list to work with and to use the assets from, which I didn't find, but I found some other tier lists from recent patches that were actually made by pro players and by other definitely high-ranking players. And the interesting thing was that looking at those tier lists, even the average player could nowadays say, okay, this tier list is not correct anymore, these gods are better. Now you have certain gods on this tier list, which was right after mid-season patch, one of them, that are just not placed high enough because the impact of Ring of Hecate wasn't really known yet at the time, and others that are just placed a little bit too high that were just a little bit overrated at the time. And like, that doesn't mean that the tier list was wrong. Based on the knowledge that everyone had at that time, the tier list was completely correct. And based on the patch notes, it was relatively hard to tell. You could very easily overlook that, you know, maybe one item in there was going to be way more overwhelming than the rest, and that was going to change the whole meta. And then that happened, and now everyone knows that Ring of Hecate is relatively strong or overpowered, and that the gods that work well with this item also work well in the current meta. But again, at that point, no one could really know yet. There wasn't really enough play with those items yet to really get a feel for them. Maybe some of the patch notes were even like not complete and there was something missing in the description or something. So a lot of things change very quickly when it comes to tier lists and metas and SMITE. But what I realized is, if you're a new player and you see this tier list from the mid-season patch and you go into the game now and then you play, say, for example, one of the gods that was placed really high was Ratatoskr. We could actually, like, we got into Ratatoskr, it's actually maybe better than a lot of people thought. But he was, I think, the highest placed god on that list. And then you get into a game and you're against an Oloron, a Freya, and a Tsukuyomi, for example. And you just get rolled over and you're sitting like, why is that happening? And then it happens again with like a similar matchup and again, and you're like, I thought my god is like the top tier god. Why am I losing so much to gods that are just way lower in placement? And of course, looking at the current performance of these gods, it would be obvious to figure out eventually, okay, the tier list doesn't quite match what is reality now anymore. And that's because the meta and SMITE still, even now, can change very, very quickly. And what I wanted to do with this tier list and with future tier lists in the same sense is kind of just give like a bit of an overview of how the meta is currently going. Obviously, every tier list has its flavor of opinion in there, and I don't even want to have discussions if like a god is A+ or A or B, you know. It's not that important for like every individual god out of the 111 that we have now to know exactly where they're placed, but rather just to get a general idea of what's an average god, what's a well-performing god, and what's maybe an underperforming god right now, so that you know, okay, this is a god that I should do well with in general, whereas this is a god, if I do well with them, that means I'm probably just relatively good at the god, based on my opinion at the end of the day still. And I think that can be useful. I think that's something, as long as I keep these tier lists like relatively updated, which I think I will do. I think I'll hopefully fit that in like every patch or every other patch or so. there should be like a general idea of how the meta is developing, and then I can just do this once here, and then I can just update it and move things around whenever it happens, and maybe have guests on for some of them and stuff like that. And I think that's enough of an explanation. I hope this makes it a bit more understandable why I'm doing this now. And with that, let's get into the actual tier list. Achilles, I think, is solid at the moment, especially as a jungler, but I don't think he's like overwhelming in any regard. Solid A for me. And just to briefly explain that as well, A is just, your base level, just average. A plus is slightly above average. S is the strong meta picks at the moment, like the best meta picks that you can pick in general. SS is completely broken. Think release Tsukuyomi, for example. B is slightly below average. C is well below average, like basically the equivalent of S on the other side. Like you really don't want to play them. And D is so bad that you would not even want to touch them at all. Arachne is pretty good at the moment. Somewhere between A plus and A. I would put him in A here now. I think it's like a little bit less than A plus, but yeah, he's doing all right for himself. Amazon Cup is always a bit hard to say. In non-competitive, I would say he struggles more. Somewhere between B and A. I would say there are a few other hunters that do like a little bit better with the current items, but at the same time, he's not terrible with them. I am actually going to put him in A as well for now. I think that's fine for him. We will talk a little bit later about the gods that got changes, by the way. We get to that. We'll look at them at the end after placing them for this patch, like for 7.8, and then we'll place them specifically for 7.9, so we'll have that at the end. Aposh, I would say, is around B tier. He really doesn't have too much going for him at the moment. Not exactly impressive in the current Conquest meta. Amaterasu is very, very strong at the moment. She is very strong in competitive, but I do think that she is also very strong in non-competitive. She has a lot of sustain in lane. She has a lot of bully potential right now. She has a ton of late game potential, obviously. She is very, very hard to kill, and she's got a lot of utility. And I'm inclined to think that for the purpose of ranked especially, or casual, she is around S tier. She's above A plus even. Anhur, just a very solid pick, I would say. I would put him around A. Anubis is very interesting. And normally he's more around B, C tier. I am actually tempted to give Anubis A plus for now. I think Anubis is interesting because he not only doesn't perform that well in like, well, any scenario above gold, I would say. But at the moment he does. Like statistically, he's performing very, very well, and that Typhon's Fang nerf is not really going to change that. And he can actually work in mid as well as solo. As well as jungle, I guess, but not to the same extent. And he also has a very nice matchups at the moment. Like, for example, he works relatively well, or like relatively okay, let's put it like that, into Tsukuyomi, among others, obviously. Yeah, I would say that he can do pretty decent for himself right now. And he's not as easy to counter by anti-heal because lifesteal is just super accessible and super good at the moment. Yeah, I don't know if this will stay this way, but I would say right now Anubis is actually in the best place he's been in ages. Ao Kwang, hard to say for me because I think Bancrofts gives him, not Bancrofts, Hecate gives him a lot more potential in some ways, but I haven't really seen it, like especially with Hecate being nerfed a little bit already. I think that's just other gods that benefit from it way more. Like if you're ranged, it just works way better for you. Still, at least A, if not better. Aphrodite, actually hard to say at this point, honestly. I don't see her performing as well in non-competitive, I would say, with the nerfs and everything. I think she's just around A at this point. Apollo, also nothing, like, not particularly strong or particularly weak, also an A tier. Arachne, I would say, especially for, farming up ranked to a certain level of play, is pretty good. If she is S or A plus, you can put her in either. She got that nerf recently. I would put her S just based on her general statistics, but she's definitely in the higher levels. Ares, A, aggressive support, mostly jungle, not as much anymore, but yeah, Son of Binding buff helps him a little bit as well. Artemis, on the current patch, the 7.8 patch. I would probably put her between A and B. I'm actually not quite sure. I think, yeah, no, I think A for now. But again, we get back to the ones for 7.9 at the end. Artio wasn't even in the game for ages. I think she's pretty solid though. I think she works well. The Stone of Binding buff also pretty nice for her. So just A. Athena always has a little bit more value in non-competitive modes, I would say. So also A, maybe otherwise in competitive. I don't know how she's performing there now. She would be a bit lower, but the ultimate alone helps her a lot. Will is actually pretty decent right now with the buff. Somewhere between A plus and A. But I think she's a bit too situational for A plus still, because there are still like quite a few matchups where she just does really poorly. And when Tsukuyomi comes into rank, that's gonna be a thing that annoys her a lot as well. So yeah. Baba Yaga. Haven't really seen enough of her to get like a full judgment based on the changes that she keeps receiving. A, and I think she's also in the upcoming patch. Baku's also pretty solid mid tier, I would say. Like, do you want to play Bakus over other supports? Not necessarily. At the same time, he comes with anti-heal. But he is such a good guard to just play an aggressive support and carry your team to some degree when your team's not doing that much. And for that reason, I'll give him A. Bakasura got a nerf in 7.8 bonus balance, which we're factoring in here already. And Golden Blade got a nerf. Haste Katana got a nerf along with that. Golden Blade should have gotten the nerf. And I think he's A+ now. He's definitely like still a very good guard for ranked and all that stuff, but I think he's not an S guard anymore, even though you could argue with Arachne. But again, I don't want to cherry pick, or like I don't want to nitpick about the details. Like they're all around the same area somewhere. Amaterasu is above Anubis, so for sure. Maybe put it like this, so it's a bit more closer in each other. Baron Samedi. I think Baron Samedi is pretty good at the moment. I think solo Baron Samedi actually works pretty well, and that's an A tier. Bastet, she's got nothing going for her. Like, I don't see any reason to pick her at the moment, which is really sad. Super situational. Like, honestly, like, yeah, I can't even think of a scenario where you'd want to put her in B tier, because if you want to slow your enemies and that's your thing, then you're playing Nemesis and not Bastet. Yeah, she's got that root now, but she's so weird right now. She's so awkward to play. I don't know. I put a C, but like it's somewhere between B and C. It's just if you're very, very like particular Bastet player, I guess, but that's about it. Bologna. She does okay. She's not really like prominent in the meta, but no, she actually benefits from a few of the new items decently. I think we might see some of that. And we got a little bit of a change next patch that might help as well. Don't want to move around then. Cabrakan, surprisingly actually doing well for the first time in a long time. I put him in A, and yeah, he's actually pretty decent as a support, pretty fun right now. Camerazotz, I would say solid A as well. Not really anything that warrants A+, but yeah, just he does his thing. Well, actually for solo, could also be A+. I just put him like towards the front of A, somewhere around here. Get the idea. Cerberus, for rank purposes, also A, I would say. Not generally the best support again, but also very good aggression, very good shred, very good damage himself. That just helps him. Crenos. This one, I'm just gonna say, like, I'm gonna carefully put him in B, but he could also be A. I just don't see the use cases for him, so to speak, where he's really effective at the moment compared to other ADCs. So I think he's a bit more situational. Chak, for now, situational. We get to in the patch. Chang'e on the current patch, where she doesn't have a buff yet, would be B as well. Chernebug, solid A, I would say, especially his ultimate is always useful in competitive. Chiron, likewise, can be played in middle now, which is interesting, so that's very enjoyable. Crenos, meh, not really doing too hot. Like, he should be doing so well, and he's really not holding up. He's super situational. If you're a really good Chronos player, obviously you can do well with him, but compared to the other mage ADCs, too situational, not enough going for him. Cthulhu, he's actually not performing that well outside of competitive anymore. He's still good for sure, but like after all the changes, like unless you're like grandmasters, he's really more of an A+ god. I think he's a really good A+ god, but not necessarily an S god anymore. Kikulen, I'll put him in A, but I would also not like disagree with anyone saying he's actually a... No, actually, no, we put him A+. He's actually doing pretty well. Yeah, he's actually doing pretty well. Cupid is in front of that, though. Cupid, I would argue, is probably the best... Like, this is influenced by competitive, for sure, but I would say he's the best non-competitive... the best non-magical ADC right now. He does very, very well in the current meta if you're building, like, the mixed build with, like, attack speed and a decent amount of power, but then also with 40% pen plus Titan's Bane effect, which is 60% pen, because Cupid can apply this to either his ultimate or to his one, and in both cases, it's absolutely great. The problem for most other gods with Titan's Bane is that they can basically accidentally apply it on the wrong ability and lose a huge chunk of damage from that passive. Cupid doesn't have that problem because both, like, either you have massive single target damage or massive AoE damage, and after that, you know, your abilities aren't really doing damage to enemies. That's not their purpose, and you get a nice attack speed increase along with all that stuff. So he works very well, like with like kin size and stuff as well. So really, really good in the current meta, and definitely got to try out if you haven't played him yet. Like, look at the most recent SPL games and check that build. It's very effective. Daji, I would say, is just average. She is a nice pick into Tsukuyomi, though, I think, if you can get your damage off before he disarms you and then just go into your 2. Discordia, also just A in my opinion right now. She's just pretty balanced. Erlang Shen is definitely above that. Could be A+, could be S. He is... No, I would say more of an A+ god. He is very good as a jungler right now. Very good with current items. I'm going to move like Anubis more towards the end of A+. Very good with the current items. Can definitely play very aggressive. I would say he's like actually better than Baka after this change, even though he can't split push as well. Like transitions well throughout the stages of the game. So definitely a good one. Fafnir, I don't know. I don't really see much of a use for Fafnir now. You could put him in A, or you could put him in B. It's just, you know, he's there, he does his thing, but he's not really a dominant pick in the meta by any means, and not a prominent pick either. Maybe we'll just give him like a clutch A. Fenrir, I would say Fenrir, compared to every other assassin, is more situational right now. Fenrir is not bad, don't get me wrong, he's definitely not a bad pick, but I think he is a situational pick, and that makes him a beat pick. Freya, on the other hand, is not a situational pick, and I think that even after all the nerfs, assuming... Yeah, I would say she's probably still S. You could argue like that she's maybe going towards A+ more than the other picks here, but yeah, she's just still stomping, and she's probably going to drop off heavily the moment the meta shifts just a little bit. Ganesh is a very solid support at the moment, just a good A. Gap is always a solid support if you're playing with people that you don't know. That's just not going to change. Guan current patch, I would say a B tier god, but we'll get to him back at 7.9. Hachiman, I would say A. Not really much to discuss there. Hades is above A, though. Hades is probably like... I think he's not super overpowered, but he's a really good solo right now. He's very nice at sustaining. Like, you need to have good team coordination to counter him, though he is counterable. That's the point, right? Like, if you have some anti-heal going and he's not really going into defense or doesn't use his ult that great, then he can still fall off. He can't carry a game on his own, but he's a very strong solo, and he transitions better into later stages now with the builds that are available to him. Habois is also a very strong pick. If you can play Habois and you know how to utilize his kit, he's definitely among the strongest. He could almost be an S pick in that case. I think a lot of people struggle with positioning with Habois, and that puts him just a little bit lower than these cards. But yeah, I mean, that's the character for you. He's a super good jungle right now. Heimdall remains strong as well. I would say he's an A+ god right now. I think he's not an A god at the moment. Hel, haven't really seen her all too much myself, to be honest. I think she's good. I think she's like, maybe she's like towards the top of A. She's, no, maybe not quite that. Like maybe like here. She's definitely good, but maybe not the best pick because there's also a lot of anti-heal going around. A lot of more other gods that warrant the anti-heal anyways. Hera actually doing very, very well in competitive. I gotta say, in casual, I think she's just there. She exists, she's good, but I haven't seen any like the Hera demolish the team or something. Hercules is above that. Hercules, definitely an A+ god. He could be an S god basically in the right hands, because he's still relatively aim reliant. Like if you can pull off your 2-1 combo or your 2 on its own often enough, or your blink 1 combo, then he's very good. But if you miss a lot, then you just lose out more than you lose out on these other gods here. Horus is an A god. Huyi, I don't even know why I put him in the middle. I can just put him here. Huyi is probably an A god as well. He can work pretty well with that build that I mentioned for Cupid as well, but other than that, he's not doing super hot comparatively, so far at least. But I could imagine that actually he climbs up more, that like he gets more prominence overall. Hunbatz. In non-competitive, I would say he's A. He's a solid pick. He's good for team fights, but Hunbat's strength has always been competitive, and he's even stronger on 0 ping, and we don't quite have that in ranked casual. That one who shall not be named is probably also A. I think people are underrating her a little bit. I think she's actually pretty solid. Izanami, also A, but I think more towards the top of A. Like definitely a very interesting pick to look at as well. Also, again, similar situation to Cupid. If you use your abilities, like 2 of them definitely do pretty good damage, even though you want to hit the Tidesbane ultimate. So that's solid overall. Janos. I think Janos is actually okay. I think he's like with the new item changes and everything, I think he does a little bit better. I think he's just more of an A tier god now than a B tier god or something. So, yeah, that's looking forward a little bit, but yeah. Jingwei in non-competitive will always be a little bit above average because she's just very frustrating to deal with if you don't have team coordination and you can't just sit in her lane and gank her over and over, meaning she is super safe and farms the late game and will definitely still have an impact at that point. Himogander, I would say, is around A. Doesn't really, not much to say. He's just average. Kali, yeah, I'm gonna put her A. She also suffers from the haste nerf, and Kali is someone who does relatively well in competitive. Actually, let me quickly check what her statistical performance is, just to match that up a little bit, because I think that Kali, compared to many others, is just. Well, yeah, okay. She's statistically still doing very well in Grandmasters. No, actually, okay. Well, looking at the stats here, that's my personal bias, I guess. Unless these are not updated yet. Oh no, this is all of 7.8. So she is A+ still then, but I will put her at the end. I think if the stats were only for the post-haste nerf, I think we would see her stats drop. And like this, she's still like above average though, so we put her into A. Like she's kind of like here-ish then, and I could imagine her dropping down to A if the haste nerf hits her hard enough, which I imagine could happen. We'll have to see the stats from next patch. Capri is good. He is also very nice against Tsukuyomi, so keep that in mind for the patch soon. And King Arthur, that's a rough one. King Arthur is like actually gonna put him back there and actually look at his stats as well. Because like the impression that I get with King Arthur every time is that people struggle with him a lot. Yeah, okay. Now the stats actually confirm that. Like it's statistically he is always performing below 50% win rate. I can't put him in A anymore. I'm gonna put him in B. If you are really good at King Arthur and you really know what you're doing, yes, he is a good god. But for the vast majority of players, that does not apply. Unless you are a dedicated King Arthur player, you're likely not going to do super well with him on a regular basis. So I will put him in B. And yeah, that's that. And the stats confirm that basically. I was tempted to put him at the end of A because he still feels strong in the right hands, but there aren't enough right hands for King Arthur. Kukulkan, A, solid pick at the moment. Does well. Nothing more to say. Kumbhakanar. No, I give him A. I give him A. It is like simply the fact that if you utilize this kit well, he has a lot of setup, which outside of competitive play has a bigger impact. If you can just set up for one other player, it can make such a big difference. And he can do that very well and has decent damage to follow up with. Kuzenbo, also A tier, I would say, but also more towards the front of A tier. He's actually really good at the moment. He's got quite a few things going for him as a support. Can be very annoying and can counter quite a few of the high tier picks, especially the AA ones as well. So yeah, he's definitely not bad. Loki is right there with Bastet. He's not completely unplayable, but you have to be very, very, very good at Loki for him to work effectively because his current kit just doesn't support a lot of things, basically, outside of one-shotting and mediocre split pushing. Medusa is in A, I would say. She struggles a bit from the fact that she really wants to ult with the Titan's Bane effect, so that doesn't work quite as well as her, but she is definitely a solid, balanced ADC. Mercury is above A. Now, actually, let me see. With this one, I want to see the stats, just to see how bold of a statement I can make, because I am tempted to go, yeah. So his win rate is generally above 50%, and the higher you go in level of play, the higher his win rate goes as well. And I'm honestly, like, we put him at the start of A+, but I would almost put him here. I will not do it because I know I would upset some people, but I think Mercury is very, very, very good in the current meta. I think Mercury, you can build him Golden Blade, you don't have to, but I think he still benefits from it a lot because it gives him insane clear because he's already really fast and he gets that super high clearing speed through that, and that just means he has like massive impact in late game, and he wants to get to late game as quickly as possible, and he wants to get his items, and gold is so easy to come by. I imagine that Hyris might scale down the gold spooling a little bit in the future, but until then, Mercury just does extremely well, and yeah, he works in every regard as well. Like the items works well, and like Arendite, and then you can do the crit items that are all really good at the moment. It's just like, it's nothing standing in his way really, and I'm tired of seeing him in my games, to be honest. Merlin is good. I think he's like also like a front A tier. I don't think he's like overwhelming necessarily. I think he's like, there's too many people that don't play Merlin well enough for him to be higher than this. Mulan. Mulan I think is also good. I'm almost tempted to put her A+, but I think she's more like an early A as well. She's solid. She's definitely a good pick in the right hands. Naja also A, but more like towards the normal field basically. Neith I will put above A. I will put an A+. I think Neith is just extremely good at the moment. Like the itemization, the meta just works very well for her. Her buff was really strong, and I think a lot of people still undervalue that because she's like the starter god, so people are always undervaluing her. And I think in a ranked scenario, her ultimate is also extremely strong, extremely potent, just to make a difference in a game basically. So I think Neith is A+. Nemesis on the current patch, most certainly, as she is so good right now. I think Nemesis is one of the best junglers all around right now because she just has so much potential in any regard. You can build her in so many different ways and they all work. If it's crit, if it's ability based, if it's AA based, it's all functions depending on the game. You can also build a little bit more bruisery, that works too. She has the ability damage, she has the basic attack damage, she has the attack cancels, she's got it all. She's what every other AA says and wants to be. Like, I honestly think that this is almost like more appropriate at this point, like saying that Nemesis is above Arachne after the Arachne nerf. And Nike is probably just A, just with a normal A. Nox is a B tier guard, and not really much of a conversation there. I think Nox is not a C tier guard. I think Nox is good at the right hands, but I don't think she's an A tier guard because she's just very situational and she's very good into some picks and not so good into others. Noah is definitely an A tier pick right now. She's actually pretty good. Her minion AI improvements and all that stuff really make her work better. Current items work well for her. So no complaints there. Odin, I honestly think he's more of a B tier pick. Again, can be good in the right game, but with his ultimate changes and everything, he's just not quite up there. It's just, yeah, a god that's good in the right hands. No, not quite. But here, Oleron goes into S. Even after the item nerfs and the targeted nerfs, this guy is just absolutely insane. Like, I think as long as Ring of Fate is not even further heavily nerfed, he doesn't have the issues in early game that he used to have. He can sustain so much. Like, Ring of Fate is like, I keep saying Hecate and then Hecate, but whatever. You just go into a game, play Oleron, let yourself get poked to half and punch a few minions and see how much you heal. If you have that ring and maybe you go in like lifesteal boots along with that and not CDR boots, like with Shoes of Magi. Even though like Oleron, honestly Oleron can do both. It's ridiculous. Like I cannot play AA based ADCs for the life of me. Like if I play ADCs, the ADCs that I can do okay with, and it is my worst role, are the ability-based ones. I cannot play AA ADCs at all. And I did not struggle playing Oleron on the new patch after the nerfs at all. It's so easy. Like, he's just so strong. He's just so good. You heal so much with the ring, then you have a self-heal, then you have insane amounts of damage, and the coordination that is required to take him down is just not there. Outside of competitive, because you need to coordinate the entire team to rotate basically, and even then you run the risk of him ulting and slowing your whole team down, and you just waste an entire rotation just for him to use his ultimate, and then he just walks away. And every late game team fight gets turned by his ult, and I think they should nerf the ult. I know they were thinking about it, I know they were hesitant, but I think this ult is just too much, and then with the rest of the kit combined with that, it's like, yeah, no, it's just too much. Like, all the lifesteal items need to go down heavily for him to find any semblance of balance, in my opinion. Osiris, a good bully at the moment. I think just a solid A tier there. Pele, yeah, somewhere here-ish. I would say like a front of A. Good jungler at the moment. Not insane, but good. Persephone, okay, Persephone is gonna stay here. I said we're gonna do some weird stuff. She's gonna stay here, and we'll talk about Persephone at the end. The reason that I'm not gonna put Persephone anywhere right now is if I put Persephone anywhere, somebody is gonna screenshot this list, put it on Reddit, put it wherever, I don't know, and it's gonna complain about my placement of Persephone, or somebody else is gonna complain about the placement of Persephone without understanding why I did it. So I'm just gonna leave her there, and I'm gonna explain it afterwards, and you have to listen to know where I'm going to place her, instead of just relying on the image. That way, no one can put a screenshot somewhere and then have people complain about it afterwards. Poseidon. Poseidon is extremely good right now. If you haven't played Poseidon yet, play him. He works very well with Ring of Hecate. He works very well with like a hybrid ability AA build where you like just put Ring of Hecate in there, maybe like a hastened ring if you want to be like really fast, or you like put like a Telekines ring there, or demonic if you need the shred anyways. And you have a Typhon's Fang for lifesteal and more shred, and then you go for some, I don't know, either some defense along with it, or some more bursts, or even something stupid like Gem of Ice, and then you're super fast and you just run away from everyone. Works extremely well in various variations, so very interesting god to play. Ragin, definitely a good pick right now. Maybe, no, this is A, this is like a solid one. Ra, on the current patch, is probably... On the current patch, hold that thought, right? On the current patch, it's probably B, actually. Because there's so much anti-heal. Or like B or end of A. But we'll look at him a little bit later. Ram, solid A, good ADC. Red Tusker is an A+ god. The pros are kind of finding ways to make him work really well, and that's going to bleed over to non-competitive very, very soon, I'm sure. He could maybe even be higher, like, or he could be a little bit lower depending on how, like, what time frame you want to look at here. But I would say he's definitely among the better picks if you know what to do with him. Raven is actually pretty good as well. With Raven I want to see the statistics just to make sure that that's something that is consistent. and not just personal experience, because I feel like I might have some bias here. Okay, I do have some bias. He is actually, well, yeah. He's performing very well, like, on higher levels of play. Less so on lower levels. I guess that's the issue. But then he also doesn't perform too well on the highest level of play. As such, he's going to be A. Otherwise, I would have put him A+, but actually, you know, let's keep it fair. Let's say he's just A. Scylla. Scylla is hard. Scylla I'm actually going to look up as well, because I think Scylla is not really doing too hot. Like, I can't really think of... Oh, okay, no, she's doing a little bit better than I would have expected. So we give her a back end of A, basically. She's actually like averaging around slightly below 50, but not below enough to be situational. Sir Cat. Sir Cat is someone we're gonna all the ones that are coming up now. I'm gonna have to look up. No, just kidding. The next one after that I know for sure. But Sir Cat is someone that I've not seen in ages. I don't think she is doing very well. Okay, no, she is definitely not doing very well. That impression just confirmed itself. She's doing better, like, until Diamond she's below 50%, and then in Master she goes above 50. But I think she's too situational. I think you need to really know what you're doing with her for her to do well. Like, maybe she's like a high B, basically. Like, most players will not get her full potential, I think. Set is definitely strong. I'm tempted to almost put Set into S, because Set is really good in both solo and in jungle right now. He's got so much damage. He's got so much aggression. I will put him in A+ because I think he's not easy to play. I think there's gonna, like, if I would look at his raw statistics, I'm guessing he would not have the best overall stats, because Set is just Set. Let me see. No, actually he reached 50% win rate already. Across all levels, but then the higher you go, the better his performance gets. Like, this guy is brutal, and he works as a jungler since the changes, so that's really nice. And the items work well for him as well. So definitely also a god. If you haven't played him in ages because you're like, oh god, he was so bad as a jungler on release, definitely give him another spin. Skadi is solid A. Sobek is solid A. Sol is solid A. Sun Wukong is above A. Sun Wukong is like a really good bully, and like he and Amaterasu and Hercules are basically like the solo lane bullies right now. Ironically, Amaterasu is a bully. These guys, mainly because of their sustain in their base kit, which Sun Wukong does not have as much of, but he has obviously more bully potential through his 3 damaging abilities, and he can still heal back up if he gets bullied out through his ultimate, even though, you know, not quite as often. And I think that combination is just very, very effective. Also got that works very well with cooldown through that, so that's something worth keeping in mind at any point. And I think Sun Wukong transitions very well into late game as well at this point, because Mystical Mail is cheaper, so you can just throw that in there, for example, and there's a lot more utility items in general that help. And he can also, like, if you go like a Soul Eater build or something, he can do decent damage even into later stage of the game, because that comes with percentage pen now. So if a Sun Wukong gets a little bit fat and farms up a little bit in like earlier stages, you can actually see them really putting pain on the squishies in late game still. Like, if they have like a Soul Eater Void Shield CDR build or something, that's not fun to play against, I can tell you that. It's not fun, because you cannot do damage to him, but he can do a lot of damage to you, and if you actually do damage to him, then he just ults away. So Sano, probably just A right now, honestly. Heartseeker just got this other change. It's a little bit of a nerf. I think he's just an average god. I mean, you could technically put him a little bit higher because it's so easy to play. Like, disregarding the fact that he gets more efficient if you tech cancel. Like, his base kit is super easy to spam, and you just push left click a few times in between. You get like half the cancels. You still get a decent amount of damage. So that makes him look pretty decent in most situations. But I would say overall he's an A god right now. Sylvanas I'm going to look up because I have not seen many Sylvanas players in ages. Oh, okay, he's actually doing better than I thought. Okay, his win rate is most certainly higher in higher levels. But yeah, no, that actually puts Sylvanas like at the front of A in terms of his stats. Definitely like around the average, but definitely towards the top end of average. If not A+ almost. Maybe. Considering if I want to put him A+. No, not quite. No, this overall stats are not quite A+. Terra, I think, is around A. I think it's not really anything, you know, she's good, but she's also hard to play for many players. And yeah, min-maxing Terra outside of competitive, outside of like the highest level of plays is always going to be hard, but you can still get enough out of her for her to be good. Thanatos. Thanatos, I'm interested to see his overall stats because I think Thanatos is actually really good right now. Okay, not quite warranted, I guess. He's also one of those that does well across most levels, but he falls off in Grandmasters, which is too small of a sample size. He's actually decent enough in Masters still, and he falls off in Bronze. So he's an A god, but like a low A god, basically. Morrigan in non-competitive is just so hard to place because I'm gonna click on her stats. I'm gonna see that her stats are super low, I bet. Yeah, 46% win rate. She's good. You just won't see it. Okay, Morrigan is situational. I'll put it this way, right? She's situational. You have to be good at Morrigan for her to be good. That still applies. But if every player that played Morrigan had 5 games under the belt, she would be A. It's just not the case. So, and she's got some really nice matchups at the moment. Like, for example, in my opinion, the best Tsukuyomi counter. So definitely not to be underestimated, but still situational. Thor is solid A, maybe like more towards the top A actually. He's actually a nice solo as well as jungler at the moment. More solo than jungler, I would say, with CDR build, but yeah, that's pretty good. Thoth, actually, I think A. Probably something that the statistics will not quite agree with overall. Yeah. Now maybe we put him in the top B. Yeah, somewhere around there anyways. Like I said, the exact placement doesn't matter, but like low-ish A at least, or high-ish B. Situational, hard to really make work, but when you make him work, he does so much damage. Yeah, that's all I need to say. Tsukuyomi, let's scroll up. I think on release, Tsukuyomi was definitely an SS card. Like on release, you could fight into 3 people. I think Tsukuyomi is still a very good god. I think he's still an S god. But I do not think that Tsukuyomi is inherently dramatically better than these gods here in non-competitive. Because Tsukuyomi does a ridiculous amount of damage, and that's his big deal. Like, in terms of player damage at the end of the game, he will have an insane amount. But he doesn't have the same utility that, say, for example, a Nemesis comes with. He doesn't have the same lockdown that an Arachne comes with. Yeah, and obviously, like each of these guys has something going for themselves. Where with Tsukuyomi, like if your team is doing really poorly, then Tsukuyomi is not going to be able to carry that match because the moment you use the ultimate, the enemies are going to have their Aegis up and they're going to use that against you, the squishies, because they're not going to need to use it against your team. And then they're going to turn on you. And then you're going to take a whole lot of damage from the team turning on you. And the more targets you hit, the worse it's actually going to be for you. And that's something, you know, with Allrun that doesn't happen. You just ult and you're safe. And then you mess everyone up. So, like, I would say, like, Allrun almost has more solo potential than Tsukuyomi. It's definitely an S tier god. Definitely very strong still, but the nerfs definitely affected him significantly as well. So that there is more counterplay against him. There's more room to deal with him. And maybe he'll actually go down to A once people learn to play against him better as well. Because I've seen some games where people really effectively timed their Aegises now, like, and countered at least most of the damage of the ultimate. And it makes a massive difference in his overall potential damage output. Tyr. Surprisingly, I haven't seen much of Tyr. Like, you would think with, like, Hercules, Sun Wukong, Amaterasu being the meta, you would think that Tyr is kind of in there somewhere, but then I guess Amaterasu is also kind of like stopping Tyr from being in there. He's not really doing well. No, okay, the stats confirm as well. It's not really anything to show for right now. Just doesn't work for him. I guess the others that he's up against just work too well into him. Like Sun Wukong can bully from range, Hercules can stun out his dash, and Amaterasu can silence him. And I guess that causes a lot of problems. And then certain other solos he cannot bully enough either. Like Thor, he can't bully that much. Set can poke him a lot from range as well. Yeah, no, that's probably his problem. I would think that a lot of that's down to him just not being good against the other matchups. Uller is good. I would say he's still an A+ hunter. If you can play Uller well, then he does well. That's all that needs to be said. And yeah, he's someone where I'd say he's A+ due to circumstance. Like, he doesn't need nerfs. I would put him behind Neath, actually. But he's also still a very solid pick overall. Varman, also someone where I would say he's above A. Also someone where I'd like to confirm that. See what the stats say here. But yeah, the stats also say that he's definitely performing well and very well on higher levels. Generally, at least 50% win rate, slightly above that. I really think Varman is a good regard. I like him like at the end of A+ here. Like, I don't have to put him further on that. But just someone who works very well with a lot of the items that are going around, and someone who works in solo but also in jungle. And his ult is just very, very hard to play into at the moment for many characters. Vulcan. Vulcan, I would think, is like a B tier god, probably. I don't know if there's anything that would warrant A tier for him. No, actually, never mind. He's A tier. Stats say A tier, so we put him A tier. I just haven't seen him enough then, I guess, or I haven't seen enough good Vulcans because, yeah. Honestly, he's not doing too well in my games, but that's just my games. Shibalanke, I would say is A as well. Xingtian, definitely A as well. Yemoja, we're gonna leave here together with Persephone. They're gonna be good friends, and I'll explain them in a bit. Ymir is going to be here. Zeus. On the current patch is probably here. And Shankui. I think Shankui is underrated. I think Shankui is an A tier god. Yeah, I think FineOK mentioned him recently and said like he might even be like in the best solos. And I really think that a lot of people are not playing him enough. Yeah, his win rate is pretty average as well at this point, so that's not like, he's not bad. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the upcoming changes for 7.9. And how they will change things, right? First, we have Serrated Edge, which will buff certain guards that can only utilize it poorly at the moment. Like, I think, for example, Varman is one of the guards that could work better with Serrated Edge now. Maybe even, like, I don't know, maybe you can fit it on a Mercury build better as well. Even though I think you can already kind of use it. And a few others, like Nemesis definitely. So, might be more interesting, but the item itself, I think it might just be too weak stat-wise so that like you might not end up picking it. We'll have to see about that. So I don't really want to shift anyone around based on that. Height of the enemy line, similar situation. It's going to be worse on a lot of guards. It's going to be better on tanky guards. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know what it, for example, means for Hades. Because getting increased defenses, but I think like what happens is if you get increased defenses, it takes 10 seconds for the stacks to be up. So you would have to have increased defenses for 10 seconds. So that's not going to work. Yeah, it's gonna be some very interesting ones. Like also someone like Varman, like if you can somehow combine the block stacks with like a high defense build, that could be really fun. Like heavy physical defense, because then you still get a lot of damage out of that. But then you have to have something against magicals as well, and you gotta get something to do a little bit more than that in terms of damage. So that's an interesting one, but like also something that generally speaking doesn't change the meta. Charge bow is already like it's funny. Like Odysseus bow is already being built, and charge bow it's not getting a buff, so it's not really going to change anything. It's already being used, but yeah, Ikai will change, won't do much. Jaren's coin, I don't know, like Doom Orb, those things, those are interesting, but I can't say if they will change something. Same with Warlock's Staff. With all of these items, I'm thinking obviously Baba Yaga might benefit from them. I don't even know where she is. She should be somewhere in A. Like, I think like with these changes, Baba Yaga might be going up potentially. But it's not enough where I'd say like put her into A+ or something. It's more like here, and then we'll see how it goes. Bulwark of Hope and Hardwood buffs don't really change anything for anyone in particular. Neither Pestilence, Contagion. Mystical Mail might change something, but it's always a bit hard to tell who exactly will benefit from that the most. And then we have the rest of the changes. So Artemis gets the Vengeful Assault, cleansing slows from her. In addition to what it does currently. I think that makes her just a little bit better, but not to a degree where I'd say that's like meta changing. Chark gets a damage increase on Thunderstrike for scaling from 60 to 70%. I honestly don't think that's going to change anything. I think Chark's just, Chark's is Chark, and these mechanics aren't inherently going to change the character. Like, you can give him a little bit more damage here and a little bit more damage there, but it doesn't change the fact this entire kit is very telegraphed and very slow. Jungle gets a significant increase in base HP as well as HP scaling, and I think that actually makes a difference. I think that pushes Jungle up into A. I think she's going to be a very interesting solo. If it goes further than that, I don't know. And she's also going to be a more interesting jungle. I actually played a jungle recently, and she actually does pretty good damage in jungle right now. She clears the camps pretty well, surprisingly. And yeah, if she makes it more survivable in early game, that means she gets past her worst stage a lot quicker. So I think that makes a difference. Same goes for Guan Yu. The damage of his Talu Assault is being increased, which I think will significantly affect especially the early jungle once again, even though I'm still experimenting around it with the exact damage values of the 3 versus his basic attacks. But either way, I think that might push him up into A because his early aggression is just going to be really rough to deal with, even like on level 1 basically. And yeah, Gab is getting a little bit of a damage increase. I think he's already A, but that might push him like a little bit up in A, like maybe like, I don't know, just here. Like I didn't really put an exact order onto this area anyways. Nemesis is getting the tiniest nerf, it's just decreasing her base damage a little bit. It's not going to change anything about her itemization or all the other things in the current meta that benefit her, so I don't think it's really going to change anything about her. Ra is getting multiple buffs. Not only the items with movement speed, which might benefit him, but also scaling increase and slow immunity on his Chu and cleansing from slows. And I think that altogether puts him into A. I think he goes up a little bit as well. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. Zeus. Now Zeus is very interesting. Zeus gets a base stat increase to his attack speed, and I imagine that might actually put him up into A. I don't want to put him there yet because it's really hard to say. I'm just going to put him like here. I think it could go either way. It could either mean that it barely makes a difference and ability-based Zeus does just a little bit more damage because you get 3 bolts a little bit quicker, or it might mean that Zeus goes the Poseidon way and you will do hybrid Zeus with Ring of Decay, Typhons, and the rest of the AA items or something. And suddenly he's a completely different god that has a very, very interesting playstyle. If that happens, he could easily go up to A+ or something all of a sudden. But we'll have to see if that happens first. So that's something we can't predict right off the gate, basically. Odin gets this Gangnir's Might cooldown decreased from 14 to 12 seconds. And I think that'll put him into A again. I think the Gangnir's Might damage and everything was pretty crazy at the start, and having that cooldown reduced again might make him a more scary, damaging character once again. So, yeah, look out for Odin. Hunbatz gets his cooldown reverted, cooldown changed, it's now scaling down again. This is something that will greatly affect competitive, and it's funny because he's actually being played in competitive right now. I don't think it's going to affect him in non-competitive as much. I would say it puts him like around A-ish, like upper A, if maybe A+, but we'll have to see about that. Like normally these stats are not necessarily like reflecting, like for Hunbatz particularly, like these chains are not reflecting what is going to happen to him in casuals or in ranked, because he's not unleashing his full potential without a team or without a coordinated team. And now we have these 2 weird ones that are left down here. So why are they down here? So both of them got a change in the most recent patch, right? And for Persephone, the changes were decreased magical power scaling for harvest from 75 to 65% and decreased harvest slow from 30 to 20%. Now, the problem is that Persephone does really well or really poorly depending on who you are. So let's say you are a high level like Masters player and you play Persephone regularly, or Diamond player maybe. You will absolutely obliterate with Persephone, and I do not think that this will change with these changes at all. Like it's a tiny bit of scaling and a tiny bit of slow, which is not even like the priority of that ability anyways. I don't think that's going to drastically impact her on that level of play. On that level of play, she is S tier. She's high up, and I think she's going to remain there after these changes. At the same time, on pretty much every level of play below that, Persephone is not doing nearly as well. That's because Persephone is a character where you really have to learn the kit. And most people don't even bother reading the abilities beforehand, so how are you going to learn Persephone? Because you really need to read how exactly every mechanic works to know what she does in terms of gold return, self-heal, plant spawn, utilizing the plants. and all that. Like, you like, Persephone lives in two worlds. You live in a world like where people understand Persephone well enough to not even get hit by her plans if they get into the third transformation stage, where they literally juke into them. Like, you can just like kind of juke straight and then angle just a little bit, or just juke straight into them, and you will not take damage from them. But you will live in a scenario where 75 of our players don't even know that. So there is a huge disparity in where she is. Like, I think for the purpose of putting her like where a silver player or gold bronze player or something would see her, she would probably be like a B tier god, maybe even C tier, because her performance down there is incredibly low. But in the higher levels, she then suddenly becomes an S tier god. So I'll give her 2 placements, right? I put her in like B in platinum and below, or in have never played this god, and S in diamond and above, or have played this god a fair bit and know how to play this god exactly. So yeah, choose which one of those you are, and depending on that, that will be your Persephone performance. And obviously, if you haven't played her and you feel like you want to play her, she's not that hard to learn. Go into jungle practice, read her abilities once, find a good build, and you'll be fine playing Persephone. She will be very, very strong in your hands relatively quickly. You just need a little bit of practice, a little bit of feel for her. And then we have Umoja. Now, Umoja is a god that was not doing well in non-competitive to begin with, but in competitive, she's so insanely good that she received nerfs. Like, she got the damage decrease of the bouncing bubble, which is down to 40 to 180, this is now down to 30 to 170, and that means that on early ranks, you're just going to bully way less, because it affects like the bubble as well as the successive bounces. And the slow is also reduced from 1.4 seconds to 1 second. So a lot of things for Umoja that make her like significantly less brutal in the early stages, in the early levels, and means she relies a lot more on ADC, which is all not exactly what you want in non-competitive, in anything that's not a scrim. And I would say that Umoja honestly is, for those purposes, like in those scenarios, she's an A tier god, not even a high A tier god. She's like towards the end A tier god, because she just doesn't do that well outside of competitive. Like it or not, she doesn't do that well outside of maybe like masters level, and that doesn't really it doesn't really reflect her performance, though. It doesn't really reflect what she does in competitive, because in competitive, again, she would probably be an S tier god, maybe an A plus god after the nerfs. But that's not the experience for most of us, and I would say she is more towards A. But again, if I would put her there, then some people would probably try and rip me apart for that. So we are just going to leave her down there, and now you have the explanation, and now you can form your own opinion about that. So we have no SS tier gods at the moment. I think Tsukuyomi is not an SS tier god anymore, even though he's definitely a strong S tier god. And we also have no D tier god. I don't think any god is so terrible that you should never play them at all. The world will hate you if you play Loki, but that's a burden you have to take. That's not that's not related to his performance, and he's gonna get a rework anyways. And then for the rest, yeah, they're somewhere in this area. Again, this is not something that's like set in stone. That's how it's for everyone. This is how it's gotta be. This is my opinion. This is my impression. This is what I think is reflective of the current meta for the most part. And I'm sure there are some gods that you may like disagree with, that you may have different feelings about. I'm especially looking at Anubis. I think a lot of people are going to say, why is Anubis an A+? But actually, if you look at his win rates across all levels of play, it is usually even above 55%, unless you're in bronze. And the average, I think, is like, yeah, it's 55%, 0.28 something as well. So that one is probably one that people will debate about, and then, and then yeah, that's my argument for that. And for everything else, I think it's just a general idea, right? You have a picture now of where things could roughly be, and I'm saying all of this, but the people that are gonna be upset are gonna not even watch the video anyways, and just go straight to the comments anyway, so it doesn't even matter. But what else? At least if you're watching this, you've heard it now. And yeah, we'll see what happens with the next patch. I'm going to save this and we're going to look at it again and see who is going up, who is going down, and how much of this may have changed due to circumstance in one way or another. And with that, thank you guys very much for watching. If you're new to the channel, feel free to hit the sub button and maybe the bell so you get notified of other SMITE content, of course, of the next tier list when it comes out, so you can kind of keep the idea of where things are going. And other than that, I hope to see you for the next one soon. Duke Sloth, out.